Okay, doomers of YouTube, I've got something for you. The OK Doomer pedal by Audio Surplus Effects. So by way of introduction, I got this pedal earlier this week and thought it was just so damn good that I've got to do a video about it. And mainly because there's only actually one video out there on YouTube, which is from Audio Surplus Effects themselves. So I wanted to go a little bit further, do some comparisons with other pedals, particularly pedals that it might be called out as being something of a clone of or inspired by, and I'm going to show you what the main differences are and why you probably want to have one. And speaking of getting one, Audio Surplus Effects are a one-man operation here in the UK, at least at the time of recording this video. So if you do want this pedal, you need to look out for the pre-orders that will be announced on their Instagram, Facebook, or newsletter. They're released in very small batches. They have been known to sell out very quickly, so keep an eye out. Now, one of the main things that comes up whenever this pedal is shared on a forum, such as Pedal Boards of Actual Doom, which is where I first heard of it, people asking, is it an Acapulco Gold? Now, why would they ask that? Why specifically an Acapulco Gold? Well, got one here. One big knob is probably the gist of it. But to go a little deeper, the Acapulco Gold is based on the sound of a Sun amp, Model T or whatever it might be. It's got Sun amp vibes. The OK Doomer has a little Sun logo as the O for the OK. So clearly something about the OK Doomer is also inspired by Sun amps, but is it inspired by Sun amps as a general sound, Sun O the band, or is that just because it's synonymous with Doom and it just does a bit of a Doom sound? Well, I can tell you one thing for sure, these are not the same pedal. They are very much a different circuit. As you'll see from the gut shots on your screen right now, the circuits look incredibly different, even to the layman, which I am. I don't really know much about circuits other than the sort of hearsay you get around as to what a capacitor actually does and why we have transistors, etc. So in short, what the OK Doomer is, as far as Audio Surplus will describe it on their website, is cascading MOSFET gain stages collapsing in on themselves. Now, the keen-eyed amongst you might have noticed that those MOSFET cascading gain stages were 4 MOSFET transistors, and there's a big assumption out there that if we see 4 transistors in a fuzz circuit, it's a Big Muff. Now, that's not quite true, although this does give you pretty muffy tones. We'll find that out, and you might be tempted to think that maybe it's based on something like a Green Russian, a 4 transistor fuzz synonymous with Doom, so synonymous that it has Dope Smoker lyrics written on the circuit board in the reissue, but that's not quite true. And to prove a point as to why transistors don't necessarily mean a specific type of fuzz, this is the Dr. Green Hairy Tongue. It's an odd little box. It sounds just like a fuzz face. It cleans up like a fuzz face. And when you open it up, there's 4 transistors inside. So that just sort of puts a spanner in the works to that theory. Another idea is that the cascading stages are something like a Boss Blues driver, but a Boss Blues driver gets nowhere near the sort of gain levels we're going to find in the OK Doomer, although there are similarities in that the OK Doomer, unlike a Big Muff, cleans up. And it actually cleans up much more like a blues driver than it cleans up like the Hairy Tongue does, characteristically of a fuzz face, and quite differently to the Acapulco Gold too, which does claim to clean up, and while it does, it's still sort of a little dark on the lower edges of your volume pot, whereas the OK Doomer will actually retain a little more high end. And so I can only draw the conclusion that this thing is unique, and with that uniqueness might well come a popularity that could propel this little one-man operation in the UK into a brand that we'll recognise pretty well in the future. So without further ado, let's take a listen to what this beast can do and how it compares to some of the pedals we've already shown, amongst others. So I'm going to be using this Strat. It's loaded with a Seymour Duncan Fat Cat P90. We're going to be going into the Victory Duchess, which is basically a little Fender clone. We're going to set it to its Bassman setting, and it's going to a single vintage 30 in this 1x12 cab. It's going to be mic'd with a 57 right at the front, couple of inches off the grill, keeping it simple and hopefully giving you a good idea of what you'll get to. The pedal has one big knob for volume. It's got a shit ton of volume, quite similar to what the Acapulco Gold does. And as you might have noticed in the gut shots, there's actually a high frequency trim inside that I'm running at full capacity. Okay, so I've got these two linked into their own loop, so I can switch between these seamlessly. So mid riff I'll be able to swap between the two to really show the differences. And let's start with a clean tone. A C standard clean tone, of course, because this is fucking doom, man. This is the OK Doomer. Hopefully you can tell it's massive straight off the bat. The sustain is just so long. Perfect for those long, sleep passages. So let's hear it with a riff next to the Acapulco Gold. First obvious difference, way more gain, as demonstrated by rolling the volume back, and we'll hear that the Acapulco Gold is pretty clean. The OK Doomer just keeps a shit ton of gain. But interestingly, down there, the OK Doomer can tighten up. So if full whack is just not really suiting your riff, you can back it off. So if it's a bit quicker, like... But this is what you'll really notice, that the OK Doomer is so friggin' filthy that it's noisy as hell. That's just the trade-off you're going to get, really. There's no way around it without a noise gate. So unless you're playing big, heavy stoner riffs, this isn't going to work for you. Okay, so on to the first Big Muff I'm going to show, because Big Muffs come in all sorts of flavours, and we can definitely tell that the OK Doomer has got this thick muffiness in the particularly lower mid-range that gives it this woof. So up first we've got the Green Russian. Sustain is maxed out. They're notoriously not as sustain-y as the other muffs, but they're generally used in Doom for their massive low end, which you will hear, but honestly, most of the time on guitar, it is too much low end and you'll get in the way of the bass player, but let's see how it sounds. To the next muff. So this is the Ram's Head reissue, way more sustain, quite a bit more of a scooped sound, but retaining a bit of like upper mid-range that cuts a bit better than a lot of muffs. But you'll probably hear that the OK Doomer is still retaining quite a bit more of a mid hump, or at least a natural mid-range compared to muffs. And when we back the volume off again, the Big Muff just sort of disappears, whilst the OK Doomer keeps a clarity in the sound. So the penultimate muff is something that will often get suggested when you're talking about, the best big muffs out there, is the Hizumitas or however you want to say it, from Earthquaker Devices. It's based on a triangle muff that was cloned into a big elk fuzz, but to me it actually sounds more like something between a ram's head and a Green Russian, as we just heard. So it's got the massive low end, it's got this kind of squeaky upper mid-range that pushes it through mixes. It's got way more volume than any of the other muffs. But despite all that, it's still not quite as gainy, quite as thick and sustaining as the OK Doomer. OK Doomer just seems to go one step above everything I can find without stacking pedals. So here it is against the famous Hizumitas. And the last muff I'm going to bring to the table is the venerable, right honourable Black Arts Toneworks Pharaoh, my absolute favourite muff. So many Big Muff variants have failed to get the Pharaoh off my board. The only thing that has managed to succeed it is the son of the Pharaoh, which is exactly the same thing in a smaller box. The differences between these two are a little more subtle, which is why I'm finding that the OK Doomer on my board I can use for just full bore, while setting the Pharaoh for something a bit tighter and a bit more manageable. But we're going for the silicon clipping on the Pharaoh, so it's really gnarly. We're going full fuzz, we're going high input. And yeah, we're getting closer, but the OK Doomer still clearly has way more gain and really just that bit more thick. And the last comparison to make, which actually features in OK Doomer's webpage in the frequently asked questions section, is it a rat? No, it's not a rat. Particularly if you know the rat circuit, which is like a very common knowledge and hasn't changed for decades or since it was invented, basically. Cascading MOSFETs versus an op-amp just isn't the same thing. They get a similar tonal characteristic, I've got to say, but I've got the distortion full whack on the rat. It's not going to get anywhere near the OK Doomer. It's still thicker down in sort of lower mid-range muff areas. And one thing I think people will connect these two with is EQD's life pedal, which also bears this Sun-esque branding. But again, despite the life pedal being a rat, very different pedals. Here we go. So there you have it, the OK Doomer by Audio Surplus Effects. One thing I haven't mentioned is the price of this thing, and considering the tags that are attached to some of the pedals we just heard and the tones that this is stacking up next to them, you will be amazed to know that this is 99 Great British pounds before postage and tax. And that's pretty incredible. That hopefully makes it really accessible to a lot of people. So if you just want to try out what a rip-roaring doom tone might be, then you can get hold of one of these if you're lucky enough to survive a pre-sale, that is. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Do let me know what you think of the OK Doomer down below in the comments. Of course, ask further questions if you want to. Let's see if you want me to compare it to any other pedals. I've got a HM2 on the shelf or something like that. I've got a lot of dirt. But until that time, go fuck yourself, Doomers.